Okay, so on Wednesday, I got to see an early screening of Michael. And the first thing I want to say about it is that Jafar Jackson, Michael's nephew, who plays Michael in this film, is phenomenal. Um, and the main selling point, the performances, other than some historical inaccuracies, which I'll get to in a bit, the only criticism I have as far as that goes is when they're reenacting the Thriller video, not the whole thing, but the dance part. It does fall a little short, but then almost anything would have. I know that sounds so fanboy, but I'm just saying, objective. On the other hand, his reenactment of the Motown 25 performance of Billie Jean, terrific. And that's one thing where the 1992 made for TV bio miniseries maybe fell short. And we'll get to that throughout the course of this. We'll get to that version too, because that was another my Jackson's biopic covering a lot of the same ground. A lot of the same people appear as characters. Both of them ending in 1984. This one, and I'm going to spoil the ending a bit, but it ends on the Victory Tour basically, but then cuts forward 4 years to the Bad Tour, which is going to be one of my biggest criticisms of this film, is how it just jumps forward a bit. Just arbitrarily will skip several years. And I think that the performances we see are exceptional. And I also want to say that Giuliano Valdi, who plays Michael as a kid, he's also amazing. Coleman Domingo, he captures Joe. He does a good job as Joe. Mia Long as Catherine, very good. But I'm not going to go down the list of everyone who was in it and talk about how good or bad they were. Oh yeah, Mike Myers once again, as in Bohemian Rhapsody, he appears as an executive, but this time he's a real person, Walter Yetnikoff. Anyway, the film starts in 1966. They're performing. Michael mouths off. He gets a belting. They're doing the song Big Boy, which was a song they recorded for their actual first single when they were signed to Steeltown Records. That was a local thing. I don't know the history of that song, but what I do know is that it's still apparently 1966. They haven't given us any new dates. And this is maybe a flaw in the storytelling, whatever, but it's still apparently 1966. They're doing Stand by Sly and the Family Stone, which didn't come out until 1969. Remember, they were basically a cover band. And then, I mean, during their pre Motown years, they were basically a cover band. And incidentally, their version of that song came out the same year, albeit late in the year. But yeah, and then in 19, it's still 1966. They even do Never Can Say Goodbye, which, while it was written by someone else, Clifton Davis, it was, as far as I know, theirs first. They were the first to do it, as far as I know. As far as I've researched it, apparently it was originally intended for the Supremes. So, in this, we kind of just jump forward a lot. It's 1969. They get signed. They record I Want You Back. They're big. In 1971, it jumps. Yeah. I forget if it officially jumped to 1970, but we kind of get between 1969 and 1971. 1971, they're performing at looks like a state fair or something. Now, I've seen big artists at fairs like this, so I don't know exactly how accurate that would be, but okay. They performed at an event like that in 1971, sure. But then it suddenly cuts to 1978. Now, if you've seen the 1992 biopic or are familiar with Michael's life more than just surface level, you know that a lot happened there that is prime material for drama. But we skip over that. Suddenly it's 1978 and he's planning Off the Wall, he's planning the solo album. I think if you watch this film in isolation, you'd get the sense that this was his first solo album, which it wasn't. He did 4 solo albums at Motown, but for all intents and purposes, it was his first because he had a lot more creative control. It wasn't just, we're going to tell you what to perform. On the other hand, just from a storytelling standpoint, even if you don't know about Michael Jackson, this might even hurt it. I mean, you know who he is, of course, but even if you're not a particularly big fan and you're just trying to follow the story, it seems like, excuse me, where did this guy come from? This Quincy, how did they meet? How did they decide to do this album? When did they decide? Is there a story there? Oh, why aren't they on Motown anymore? I mean, Motown, for some people, what label he's on wouldn't be important, but in this case, it is. Okay, in this case, because Motown is a famous and kind of culturally relevant label, not that it's more than just a record label, we'll put it that way. And then when they get into the tour later in 1981, it's like, excuse me, why are they called the Jacksons now and not the Jackson 5? Is it because there's only 4 of them? Because we'll touch upon this historical accuracy in a moment. Earlier in the film, we're introduced to his bodyguard, Bill Bray. And after we get through the recording of Off the Wall, we're introduced to his attorney, John Branca. Both these are real people. Both these are important people in his life and absolutely deserve to be characters in the film. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be. Those are characters, along with Quincy Jones, that are not depicted in the 1992 biopic. However, one grave sin, in my opinion, is that the film kind of almost treats his brothers like ciphers. And one historical inaccuracy they have is when they're in the meeting discussing the 1981 tour, and one of them says, "We can't tour without Jermaine." Bullshit. Bullshit. They toured without him for, what, 5 years before that? Something like that? Between 1976 and 1979, and in the 1981 tour, of course, they toured without him. They recorded their 2 best albums as a group without him, as well as 2 rather forgettable ones. And this isn't me attacking Jermaine in any way, but yeah, the film kind of mentions that he's no longer in the group, and he may, doesn't mention why, and that is because he married the daughter of Berry Gordy. So he stayed at Motown for a while and basically pursued a solo career. Also, their younger brother, Randy, isn't mentioned. And I was a little bit confused. Wait, is it? No. And then it occurred to me. We're seeing Tito played by somebody who looks like Randy. So, and who, in my own subjective opinion, based on interviews I've seen with one, interviews I've seen with the other, my understanding of their relationship to Michael, just my opinion, acts more like Randy. So they've basically coagulated Randy and Tito into a composite character. And maybe that's because he didn't want to have it be depicted in the film. That could be. We'll get to another sibling who felt the same way in a bit. But the three oldest brothers are all listed as executive producers, which may or may not be true. I don't, may just be an honorary title or not. I don't know. But when it comes to their oldest sister, Reby, their older sister, Reby, is not mentioned in the film at all or seen in the film at all. Neither is their younger sister, Janet. She was the closest to being as big as Michael. Now, again, apparently she didn't want to be mentioned in the film. She said, fine. They're respecting her wishes, and I can respect that in turn. But it does show you that this is not exactly going to be the definitive retelling of his life. But again, whatever. You're not a fan. You don't really care about these people. I'm just saying that even if that's the case, you might expect the rest of the Jackson 5 to have more of a persona in the film. But that brings us to Joseph Jackson as portrayed by Coleman Domingo. He does a great job. He looks like him and everything. He looks more like him than Lawrence Hilton Jacobs, who played him in the 1992 film, and yet in that one, I think they do have a couple of scenes that hint at him, there being limits to how much of an asshole he is. Whereas in this one, he's just kind of a supervillain. Just a good comparison. Just compare the 1992 version and this version when it comes to the accident where his hair catches on fire. When it comes to the event itself, this one does a little bit better job of being accurate. But when it comes to the what happens afterwards and Joe's reaction, I think the 92 version gets it a little better. I think he actually did say, "How do I feel? That's my son in there." Whereas in this one, he's still like, "Whoa, can he still perform?" Or things like that. Now, again, all I'm saying is that even though Lawrence Hilton Jacobs didn't look as much like Joe, they still, I think, treated him more as a three-dimensional person rather than just the bad guy. And it ends with him telling the audience, "This is our last tour." During the Victory Tour, which may have been true, but I don't think this is the first Joe heard of it. In fact, I believe he tossed around the idea of calling it the Final Curtain Tour, but maybe those around him thought that it was kind of a downer. And again, there's some potential that was left on the floor when it comes to how Jermaine got back in the picture. And that had to do with the Motown 25 performance, sort of. Anyway, but again, after that happens, after the Victory Tour happens, and Michael tells off his father, and he and Bill Bray ride into the sunset, we suddenly cut to the Bad Tour, 1988. Now, we're told there's going to be a second film, and there's no reason they can't start off before that performance, before 1988. Maybe they've already filmed stuff. I've seen pictures of Jafar Jackson that look like he's Michael in the early 90s. We'll see where that takes us. But that's an awful lot to skip. just going from 1984 to 1988. He purchases the rights to the Beatles songs. He writes and records We Are the World with many other big stars, and writes it with Lionel Richie and records it with many other big stars. He makes Captain EO, and of course, he records the Bad album. Here, we're promised a second movie, and unless this film flops, which I don't think it will, we're probably going to get that film. But it's going to be a bit of a downer, obviously. So, yeah, my biggest problem isn't just the fact that it doesn't include every waking moment of his life, but that it kind of makes some odd choices in what to include and what not to include. Oh yeah, because like I was saying, you might wonder how it is that he and Quincy Jones are now working together. They met when they were making a movie called The Wiz. Why did they leave Motown Records? Because they wanted more creative control. Why wasn't Jermaine in the band? Because he married Berry Gordy Jr.'s daughter. So, in skipping over that, I, as a fan, can say, well, wait a minute, but I have a feeling that a casual fan would have a little bit more, or even a non fan just watching it, because the hype might be like, well, wait a minute. Again, though, I do have to acknowledge that the performances, if that's what you're watching it for, they're damn good. Um, Kind of the 70s and 80s nostalgia, sure. I just feel that it could have been a much better film, and that the 1992 version did some things better. And by the way, the guy who played Michael as an adult in that version, he was good in the dramatic scenes. Unfortunately, he passed away not long after it aired. Anyway, so I wish Jafar Jackson much better luck. In any case, I just think it could have been better in storytelling, and some of these little inaccuracies may not be a big deal, but I think some of them are.